also hosting this call for us, and he's the back end guy, and he's handling all of the tech for me. So big shout out to Nason for doing double, triple duty tonight, and we really appreciate his efforts. Okay, well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I've got two screens full. That means we've got about 50, almost 60 folks here. Some more will be coming in as we go along. And I'm just so delighted to see everybody. I really am. So I want to welcome everyone again. Oh, hi, Amir. Amir from way up in Canada, up there where my sister Regina is, and she's here too, from Kelowna. So for those of you that are here for the first time, I just want to say briefly what the program is about and why we're here, what it is that we're doing. This program is called a Baha'i series for racial healing and racial justice. And this started as an initiative of the Baha'is here in Salisbury/Wacomico County, Maryland. We're a small group of four or five Baha'is. And we decided we'd been wanting to work on this topic pre-COVID and pre-George Floyd, but didn't have the means or the resources to do it at the local university, that kind of thing. And then, of course, Zoom came along, and the tragedy of George Floyd. But that tragedy, we are all working to take that martyrdom and the many martyrdoms that have gone before him and turn those into positive actions for social change and for justice. So racial healing is required and racial justice is required. And that's where we got the title of this. So this program addresses many issues or topics related to those two things: racism, racial justice, racial healing. And today we're speaking about, our panelists will be speaking about their experiences as bi or multiracial individuals in a society that's constructed primarily in Black and white terms. So where do you fit in and how do you fit in? And this is really a central issue, I think, to how we're going to proceed as a society in overcoming our racism and starting to really appreciate and honor this wonderful diversity that God has given us. Because this diversity is something really to be upheld, respected, and adored and admired. So having said that, we're going to start with a couple of prayers, a very brief devotional, and then we will invite our panelists on. I'll name them, let them know what order they are appearing in, and then we'll start with our first panelist. If you got the email, there were a series of 5 questions that I asked each of the panelists to consider. And I'm going to ask each individual to address the first 1 or 2 questions. And we also have photos of their families. Isn't that great? So we'll get to see them as well. And then we'll break into a larger, with all the panelists and discuss some of the other topics there. And the panelists can, feed into that, as they feel appropriate. So with that, let's see if I got share screen up for me. There we go. Thank you, Nason. I have a brief video here. This is going to be followed by a prayer from Kenton Dunbar. This prayer, this is Native American History Month, but it is also at a time when we've become, at least me personally, have become much more aware of the import of Thanksgiving to the indigenous community throughout the North and South American continent. And to those family members, this is a time of mourning for them. It is not a time of celebration. It is not a time of Thanksgiving, but truly a time of mourning. So in the spirit of honoring them, Kenton Dunbar, who is from Chile, originally from Southern California, but he's been living in Chile for a very long time. He's going to say a prayer for humanity, both in Mapuche, Spanish, and English for us. And then I have a brief song by an Indigenous person that will be shared. It's not a prayer, but I'd like to honor again the Indigenous peoples. And then we'll have Milton Conway and Chuck Hendrickson. They have worked together and have something special for us. And then we'll proceed into the program. So having said all that, let me bring up this first one. Then we'll be followed by Kenton's prayer in the 3 languages, and then Milton and Chuck. And then I will close the devotional portion this evening with this last video that I mentioned. So let's see here. There we go. Okay.
God is sufficient unto me. He is the all-sufficing. God is sufficient unto me. He is the all-sufficing. Let the trusting trust Him. Let the trusting trust. Let the trusting trust Him. Let the trusting trust. Let the trusting trust.
I'm gonna chen. I'm gonna chen. Ruko fem tune kom tami pu kona ni puke. Ka telum tu pen tune tami fucha nualam. Inale wenunan tami feipin. Ka yam twain nun tami nunye tunu. Aju tune awem gonna chen. Tanyi cheo ni amuan. Ka elu fini ta nuen tami koya teu awem gonna chen. Ithu kunu fem kilne fe enun. Jem toi femi tanyi truka kompual. Helum tule enun tami kemun ka mo entu tu fine tami puyen meu. Rof thungu emi ta keju kelu ka ni yethor nemi. Oh mi Dios, une los corazones de tus siervos y revélales tu gran propósito. Pueden ellos seguir tus mandamientos y atenerse a tu ley. Ayúdales, oh Dios, en sus esfuerzos y confiéreles fuerza para servirte. Oh Dios, no los abandones a sí mismos, sino guía sus pasos con la luz de tu conocimiento y anima sus corazones con tu amor. Verdaderamente, tú eres su ayuda y su Señor. O God, my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, leave them not to themselves. would guide their steps by the light of knowledge and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily, thou art their helper and their Lord.
Ya Baha'u'llah. Ya Baha'u'llah. Ya Baha'u'llah. Ya Baha'u'llah. Ya Baha'u'llah. Ya Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, friends. I can't locate the recording I thought I'd set aside for this evening. So we'll just go forward with the program at this point, and hopefully I'll find it later. So let me welcome all of our participants. I'm going to call you out in the order in which you will be sharing today, initially, before we go to the open discussion. And if you could wave to everyone, unless Nason's able to pull you up somehow, I'm not sure. But Karen Streets Anderson, I know you're there. There she is. Okay, Dominique. Okay. Elaine. All right. Narissa. Aaliyah. Where's Aaliyah? Maybe she's on the second screen. Aaliyah, are you here? Okay, so we may not see Aaliyah tonight. I don't know. Okay, so Marco probably isn't here either. They're a married couple. Marco, are you around? Okay. Well, I'm sure mom will be in touch with you to see where you guys are. And then last but not least, Nason. You waved everyone, Nason? There we go. Awesome. Thank you. What a great, good looking group. I'm telling you. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here for a second. And let's see, which one is it? Oh, yeah, it's this one. Okay. And again, this was sent out in the email, but I thought it might be easier if people could also read it rather than me just reading it to you about the panel. You know, as I said earlier, you know, it's tough. growing up in a world that's dominated by black and white constructs. And that affects us and informs our thinking, as this panel will, about what would a post-racial society look like? What would that even be? One where humanness is what's important, right? We enjoy and experience and revel in our phenotypical diversity, right? We don't need to give that up. But what would it be when people really get it that we're all the same human race, quote unquote? Of course, some terms would have to change too, right? But also, so how can these experiences that we'll hear about today, perhaps they can help us understand more deeply where we are now in terms of discourse on race issues. And again, as I suggest here, could society, at least parts of society like us, be it possibly, starting to see a transition, or at least envision a transition from racial mindedness to human mindedness? And if we have human mindedness, what does that mean? That's very exciting to me, because to me that says, oh, we got to be at justice for that if we're treating each other the same. And seeing each other as all members of the same human family. So having said all of that, the first two questions that I asked our participants to consider in advance were first to tell us a little bit about your background, the era that you grew up in, the family photo, which we have, and I'll be pulling those up shortly. And then secondly, the joys and challenges of being you. And then we'll come back again to the larger panel to consider the last three questions. So let me bring up, so first up is Karen Streets Anderson. And Nason, how should we do this? Should I do screen share first so we can show Karen's photos and then she can just speak about them, right?
Sure, we can do it that way.
Is that the right way to go? Okay, thanks,
Sure.
Nason. So let me go back to the screen share here and get those photos up. So I've got them queued up too. Whoops, wait a minute. Not quite as cute as I thought. There we go. All right, get it. Presentation. All right. But then get back here. Share screen, right. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay, Karen, introduce yourself.
Okay. My name is Karen Streets Anderson. I'd like to start off by saying that I identify myself as African American because I was raised in the bosom of African American culture. Genetically, I'm triracial. I'm African, I'm Caucasian, and I'm also indigenous to the Americas. Seminole ancestry on my mother's side and Cherokee ancestry on my father's side. DNA tests on my dad, his brother, and my oldest son have confirmed all of these things. I'm third generation Baha'i. On the left, you'll see my dad and my mom. That's their wedding picture, 1957. And they got married at Llewellyn Baha'i School. Back then it was called Davison. What's very interesting is that my father, who is 36% African, considered himself African American. He was raised in a Black family. He lived in a Black neighborhood. The couple in the photograph right next to him are his parents. My paternal grandmother, Odie Mae, and my grandfather, Dr. Bernard Streets. It's obvious looking at them that they could pass for white. And genetically, they were more white than Black and indigenous. But that's not the way they lived their lives, and they consciously chose to not pass for white. Interesting about my dad and my mother, they got married in the state of Michigan, and the state of Michigan refused to write his race on their marriage certificate as Negro because of his appearance. So they are listed as an interracial couple in the state of Michigan, and their marriage certificate is listed as him being white. He had a similar experience when he was in the Army in the Korean War. In those days, armed services were segregated, and African American soldiers were in one area and the white soldiers were in another area. And my father was forced to be in the white regiment because of his appearance. My dad was a microbiologist and a food scientist and a corporate executive, and my mother, a special education teacher. My grandparents, my grandfather was a prominent dentist, and my grandmother was a ferocious civil rights activist. In fact, my whole family, they were civil rights activists. And they did a lot of work in desegregating stores, restaurants, and the like in South Bend, Indiana, Niles, Michigan. I was a child during the turbulent civil rights and Vietnam War era. And my teenage life was the decade of the 1970s. And that decade, there was exciting activity on the women's rights, American Indian rights, and environmental movement fronts. So I guess you could say I was shaped by a lot of social justice movements. And I got to have a bird's eye view as a child and as a teenager because so much of it was also happening in my own home. I'm third generation Baha'i on my father's side, and my mother was the first Baha'i in her family. My grandparents discovered the Baha'i faith in the late 1930s, early 1940s, and they were taught the faith by Hand of the Cause of God, Mr. Lewis Gregory. They helped to establish the Baha'i community in South Bend, Indiana, and they helped raise the local assembly there. And that local assembly is still flourishing. Joys of growing up was one of the questions.
Mhm.
I really benefited from growing up in a well-educated family firmly rooted in the faith. I also benefited from the fact that my elders lived to be really old. So I had a lot of experience and exposure being with great-grandparents, grandparents, great aunts, great uncles, and they were storytellers. So they passed on to us the significance of our family history. We knew we were loved and valued, which was a really good thing because my family didn't look like anyone else's family. Now, interracial families are much more visible. We really were the only ones in the early 1960s in our part of the country. And it wasn't easy.
What part of the country was that, Karen?
I grew up in a place called Michiana, as southwest as you can go in Michigan, and then northern Indiana. Niles, Michigan, South Bend, Indiana. Niles, Michigan was rural and predominantly white. And the reason why we ended up living there is because my parents couldn't buy a house in South Bend, Indiana, which was my dad's hometown, because they were considered an interracial couple. They had wanted to raise my sister and me in South Bend because there was a Black community there, but they couldn't buy property and no one would rent to them either. So my grandfather, my dad's dad, owned some property that he grew organic food on. And so he sold a portion of that property to my parents and they built a house. We grew up, like I said, in rural Michigan. And I'm sure you all are aware of what was going on in my home state the past 2 or 3 months with militia and a lot of, anti-Black sentiments, lots of racism in the state of Michigan. And I grew up surrounded by people who were militia, by people who were very much involved in the Ku Klux Klan. And so I knew firsthand what it was like to be otherized. And so to be raised in a solid, strong family where we were literally prepared for what we were going to be dealing with before we actually dealt with it was a blessing. And I really attribute the emphasis on education and being Baha'is and being raised in the Baha'i faith as my protection and my sister's protection. One of the things that my grandparents and my parents taught us was that the education we would be receiving at school was the kind of education that we would have to spiritually, mentally, and emotionally protect ourselves from. They did everything they could to prepare us. We looked different as well. I was light-skinned. I am still lighter skinned. Unfortunately, colorism was even more prominent back then and more obvious than it is now, but it's still very much a part of life in America. So a lot of the Black girls didn't like me because of my so-called alleged good hair.
Right.
I come from a family of scholars and intellectuals. And I'm not saying this to, in any way, shape, or form, brag or anything like that, but it's a part of the history that a lot of people aren't aware of. My grandparents are a part of that talented 10th. And some of their close friends were people like Langston Hughes. They knew Langston Hughes. They were very close to Mary McLeod Bethune. Lena Horne would stay at their home. So would Josephine Baker, because when these entertainers would travel, there was no place they could stay. So what they would do is they would stay in the homes of Black people who lived, you know, along the route. George Washington Carver was a very good friend of my grandfather's, as was W.E.B. Du Bois. And a lot of people don't know that his wife was a Baha'i. I mean, I'm not sure if a lot of people are aware of the fact that W.E.B. Du Bois' wife was Baha'i, and, you know, he was somebody who knew a lot of the Baha'is back in the early days of the faith in America. So, you know, it was an exciting time for me to be a child and to have a lot of exposure to some of these people, these stories. So my otherness was, I guess, nurtured in a loving way on the home front, which then allowed my sister and I to remain as strong as possible when the darts were flying, and they flew. People would yell at us, spit at us, you know, call my father all kinds of horrible names because they wondered why he was with a Black woman. He was Black though. And so I would have to say that as hard as it was, it made me the person that I am. And I'm not in conflict internally about who I am. I embrace all that I am, and I coexist quite peacefully within myself. And I thank my ancestors and I thank my parents and my grandparents for helping me to withstand all of the tests and tribulations of that early period of my life. I'm
Thank you.
still here, and still I rise.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
Maya.
Karen. That's fascinating. My goodness. We could spend a whole weekend with you in a room. I can tell you must have a tremendous store of stories and experiences to share. So let's go on to our next presenter. That's Dominique. And let me get her photos up.
How can I go after Karen? I just learned so much in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, we all
But I'm
do.
happy to share our story.
We
Well,
all do.
I
If
can get started, Charlene, while you pull up the picture, if that helps with timing.
Yeah, sure. That's a good idea. You go right ahead, Dominique.
My personal background is that my father is Persian and my mother is British, and I was born in England and I moved to the States in 1995. when I was 19, I became pregnant with my daughter Jamila, and she's sitting right in front of me right now, but she's being a little bit shy. Jamila identifies as mixed or African American mixed, and we are a pretty multiracial family. I also call out my husband, who's a recent immigrant from the UK also. So it's interesting being like white immigrant in the US, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. And then my sister-in-law is Indian, so like from India, and so or her family's Indian. So this is a picture of our family at my wedding last year. My father and mother, and my two brothers, and my sister-in-law, and Jamila. And so we're a pretty diverse family, and I grew up that way. I grew up in a Baha'i household. My father is in the room too, and he was just telling me that because I wasn't sure. I was like, wait, what generation Baha'i am I? But my grandfather's ancestry goes back to the times of Abdul Baha, so we're pretty deeply rooted in the Baha'i faith here.
Wow.
Jamila was raised Baha'i. And I was raised Baha'i. And what that meant for our family was that we had friends from all over the world. So we were Baha'i in our religion, but also in our actions, and our home was very like, we had decor in the house that was from all over the world. We traveled a lot. We're privileged in that we got to travel a lot, and then we had friends from all over the world. So like our close friends growing up were from Sri Lanka, Suriname, like Ethiopia, and growing up with all these different foods and stuff. So I would say that I grew up in a pretty like post-racial dynamic or thinking, and so I've experienced more. Well, I experienced the black and white racism when I moved to the US in 95, because I didn't know what to identify as. I didn't really feel white American and all of that. And then I've experienced it again through Jamila's eyes. And so as we go on to the other questions tonight, I'm here trying to represent Jamila. We had the 5 questions that Sherilyn shared. We have had many discussions as a family this past week to prepare for tonight, so I will try to represent her. She sat right here, so she can tell me if I'm not representing her well.
Thank you, Dominique. Hi, Jamila. Can you show your face and at least wave at us? Hello, artist. She's a phenomenal artist, folks. Okay, thank you so much, Dominique. Okay, Elaine.
Hi, everybody. Let me get my view here.
Hello.
Hi. Okay. Sorry.
Let me get your pictures up.
Getting everything in place. Hi, I'm Elaine Tokowahi. I was born Elaine Howard, and I'm 40 years old. So I grew up in the 1980s and the 1990s. My mother is Lita Ilalahia Howard, and she comes from Tonga. And my dad is William David Howard, and he comes from where I live now, which is Marin County, California. And so you'll see me on the left with my mom around 1986, probably. I was 6 years old, like around Christmas time. And then me last year with one of my favorite people in the world, my grandma, and she passed away, Faye Irene Wasserstein Howard. She was descended from Eastern European Jews, and her family came out to California from New York and Connecticut, and settled here in California, where she met my grandfather, he was from Missouri, and I think that they were leaving sort of more conservative ideals in their area of Missouri, and they came out to California. So there's a lot of coming to California to start a new life in my family. My mom came to California as a student. She was adopted and but raised with relatives in Tonga. And my daughter is here and she's trying to talk to me about having ice cream. Okay, fine, go. Okay, so I have two kids. Okay, whipped cream, yeah, sorry. So that brings me, my parents got married very young. As I said, my grandmother was Jewish. My grandfather did not have a practicing religion. My mom was the daughter of a Christian pastor. So she was adopted, but she knew my grandfather from that side. So he was a Christian pastor, a minister, and whose wife, my grandmother, became a Mormon. And that was super scandalous. It's a big family story. And I became Baha'i when I was 27. I grew up and I was very confused about my identity growing up, about my racial identity. I grew up in a very wealthy area as a working class person. And so my grandparents had moved to Marin County across the bay from San Francisco. And I grew up there after they let us live there. And so growing up there, I didn't look like other people who lived in Tiburon, California. I didn't have the same economic capital that they did. We didn't have country club access, none of that stuff. I didn't go to camps and everything. So I ended up framing myself a lot as what I didn't have. And I remember questioning, or not questioning, I remember asking about God and about spirituality at a very young age, probably around 6 years old, in that picture around that time. And I remember my dad telling me, we don't believe in organized religion. And my mom going, yeah, we don't believe in it because I grew up in my church and all people did inside the church was gossip. So why do you go to the house of God and gossip when really it's the most ungodly thing you could possibly do? So we just have God in our hearts. So we grew up, and I have one sister, so a little sister. So we grew up thinking that way. When I was growing up, I didn't feel like my ethnicity, my ethnic background was really at the forefront. It was more economic class. So that was really the factor where in Tiburon, it's a status game all the time. And us, my father, he hauled garbage for a living, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom with us. And so my family hauled the garbage of the other people's families. And, in our home, we had the leftover couches and TVs and things like that as our furniture. And it was something that was just normal. I remember going to college, and a lot of the families in Tiburon, the moms, they were rooting for me because I did well at school. And even though I didn't really know I was what you might say like disadvantaged at the time, I came from a loving family. I guess, they wanted to help me into the private school space, and they wanted to help me out and like rise the ranks or whatever. So I did well, and then I went to college, and I thought, now I'm going to be able to be with other people who are like me. And that was hard. I mean, there weren't other Pacific Islanders who were in college with me in my first year. And I thought, where can I find my people? I just feel really lost. I mean, I have great friends and I'm doing fine, but that part of me was empty. And I was thinking about this dichotomous role. Like, if you're not white, you must be Black. So I was like, I'm going to go out and make Black friends, as many African-American friends as I can. And I lived in a building in college that also housed the African-American theme floor. And that was a floor that was almost all African-American students, as all except for one. I remember she's from Laos. And I would go down there and I'd be like, hi, like, I'm Elaine. I'm just, how's it going? And I remember everyone being so welcoming, and also them telling me, do you know, besides the girl from Laos who lives here, that you're the only person who isn't Black who comes to our floor? And I was like, what are you talking about? And I just remember that so vividly, and my whole world was like, wait a minute, I thought if I didn't belong here, I go over here and I'm learning about this, and it was a real shock. And so I was like, okay, well, we're all going to remain friends, and then I'm going to branch out. And like, wow, I've never been friends with people who are Latino before. And it might sound ridiculous, you guys, but I was like 18, acting this way. I see some of you rolling your eyes like, what are you talking about? So basically, I became friends with other people, and then they kept saying, you're the only Tongan person I've ever met before, or you're the only person who comes into our ethnic space and, is being friends with us. And I thought, why is this happening? And so I just kept making friends, and I ended up carving out a space for Pacific Islanders in college so that we could meet each other. And it was beautiful. And I was like, why did, I have to make this space? And I hope that I belong in this space. And I really felt like I did. But I saw the diversity in our peoples, as I saw diversity in all the different groups. But really later on, I moved to Tonga because I thought I could be of some service over there. And that's where I felt the faith when I encountered the faith for the first time. And so when I found people who were living there, and they were mixed race as well. They were also Tongan and Balangi, or Tongan and white, or Tongan and European ancestry. And they had like these glowing hearts. And I remember thinking, I think those are my people. These Baha'is seem like they're my people. And I met other Baha'is, and it didn't matter what ethnic background they were. There were Fijians, there were Samoans, there were Australians. It just felt like this is finally home. And so that was, 13 years ago. And since then, I kind of don't have ethnic issues anymore. I had a funny thing happen though, because I married a person. His name is Fatai, and he's Tongan and Indian mix, Indian from India. And I was like, oh, I don't think my kids they'll finally look Tongan. I gave birth to my daughter, and she was light skinned with blonde hair, straight blonde hair.
Wow.
I went, oh my God. God just wants to show that we are all diverse and we are beautiful no matter how we look. But yeah, and so that's me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elaine. That was wonderful. Thank you. We're so glad you're here. Okay, Narissa is next. Let me get her picture up here. And just a second. Go. And whoops, there we go. Okay, Narissa Brush.
All right, so some of you may recognize the woman in the photo. That's my mother, Sherilyn, who's facilitating this tonight. So this is, I'm not sure what year this was, but I was born in '83 in Southern California in San Bernardino. So in this photo is my father, Trevor, my mom, Cheryl, and then my sister, April. And I'm trying to think of like where I want to start. yeah, I mean, growing up in Southern California, I think, we lived in a fairly diverse neighborhood. Lots of different folks around. I was brought up in the faith. I am not a practicing member, and I never declared. But it is something that I think about fondly. I want to shout out, because there's a bunch of people here that I grew up in the faith with, or that, were part of that journey. So I'm seeing Ellie, I'm seeing Kenton is here, Regina Yonker is my aunt, Judy Amburn is here from Madison, Wisconsin. So I think that's kind of cool. So I was really happy to see all of those folks on here right now. So we lived in San Bernardino, California until 1990 when we moved to Madison, Wisconsin. And so I did most of my growing up there. And then in 2017, I moved to Minneapolis to start my undergraduate education. And then now I'm in Columbus, Ohio, starting my PhD. So growing up in Southern California in the Baha'i faith, I was actually looking at some photos of like parades, something it was in Kelowna, actually, in Canada, a couple of parades. And I still have like, some old t-shirts and stuff like that. But it was really interesting because I just remember being around like a lot of different people, a lot of really kind, caring people. And that's something I really remember about that. Honestly, I never really thought much about racial identity and, kind of what I was for a long, long time. Even when I was in high school doing theater that was about differences and about diversity, it never really was clicking with me, like what that meant for me personally. And, I do a lot of reflection on that. And, I think it's interesting because being a mixed person, and that's how I identify, is, my first memory of a racist encounter was not something that happened to me. It was something that happened to my sister. And so, that's hard because like I grew up with this really weird sense of privilege of being racially ambiguous. And so you're treated completely differently because people don't know like where to put you. And if my skin was any darker or my hair any kinkier, I probably would have had a completely different experience growing up. And so kind of, knowing the things that my sister has gone through and that I was kind of, shielded from that just because I looked slightly different, it's hard to kind of swallow that sometimes and really like, it's, you feel kind of sick, like you feel icky about it, even though it's nothing that you chose. And so I think, that is a big challenge, I think, for mixed folks, especially those of us that are, passing or really racially ambiguous. A lot of people for the longest time thought I was Hispanic or Latina. A lot of people, like I would have like native Spanish speakers like from Mexico, like walk up to me and start talking in Spanish to me. And I'm like, whoa, like, hold on. I'm like, I know a little bit, but not that much. Or Indigenous folks asking me if I was Native. And a lot of people wanted to put identities on me. And the question of like, what are you? Was something that was just like, oh God, here we go. And, there would be people that were like, I would tell them and they're like, no, I don't believe you. You're Puerto Rican. I know it. I know it. I know it. I know it. Like, people would argue with me about this. And it's just like, are you serious? And so I think, and so I'm a sociologist. So I think about a lot of like the systemic things and, stuff like that. And I think, there is a lot of this fear about ambiguity and really not being able to make sense of something and have it defined. And so that's why people want to put a label on you. And I think, when I think about it, some of the struggles that I had, I didn't really understand like the, systemic parts of it. And so I wasn't, fully understanding like how bad it was. So when I went and got my ID when I turned 18, and I had to pick a race. And I was like, I tried to just write an OTH for other. Like I tried to other myself. And they were like, no, you can't do that. You have to pick one. And I was just like, why? Like, what does it matter? And they're like, well, when they run your ID, they see on the back end what race you are, and then they try to match it. And I was like, oh, great. So I picked Hispanic. And I went with that for a long time because I was like, screw it. That's what they think I am. Like, if I put black on there, they're going to be like, no. If I put white, they're going to be like, no. So what do, right? You go with what people think you are. And so, I did struggle too with not feeling that I was white enough, not feeling that I was black enough. I've never, said that I'm black, and it's not that I don't think that I am or that I'm ashamed. I think that it doesn't feel appropriate to me to claim that, because my experience was so different, you know, and that I think there is part of identity that really is rooted in culture and how you brought up. And I just, you know, I didn't have that distinct experience that a lot of other folks do. I mean, there's definitely some things that I totally relate to and understand, and, you know, culturally, but I think it was hard for me to try to claim one, because it meant that I had to remove the other. And I really, really struggled with kind of how do I navigate that, and, you know, really understand that I can claim both, you know, and I'm not then, you know, saying one is lesser than. And so, yeah, and I went to a really diverse elementary school when we moved to Madison, Wisconsin. We lived in Eagle Heights, which was the student housing complex for folks that went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And, you know, so a lot of international students. You know, I remember this girl, Cindy, she was from Indonesia. And I remember when she first came, and it was, you know, it was great to just meet new people. And, you know, there were a lot of like rich white kids, and then there were a lot of like really diverse kids. And so that was also like an interesting dynamic that continued to play out into high school. And, you know, so it's really just interesting. And so, you know, I don't know if I ever like have felt like a place in terms of my racial identity. I feel like I struggle sometimes to fit in. You know, and part of that I think was just a lack of introspection until much, much later in life made that much more challenging, just because I wasn't necessarily like forced to have that. And so, yeah, I think, you know, it's interesting, you know, sometimes I like to play the game with people when they're like, what are you? And I'm like, what do you mean? You know, and they're like trying to push it. But then I also get a lot of, you know, microaggressions about that, you know, with people making assumptions. And I remember this was a few years ago now, but I was talking to my boss, my supervisor. We were talking about food, and he, you know, brought up cilantro. And I was like, oh, I hate cilantro. It's disgusting. And he was like, but isn't that the food of your people? And I was like, I said, I'm not Hispanic. We've talked about this, you know? And so, you know, that it still kind of comes up, and, you know, it's hard to kind of grapple with that. But, you know, I love being who I am. You know, both of my parents gave me like really awesome things, you know, and I appreciate that. And Elaine, was you were talking about, you know, there's a lot of going to California to find things. Like my dad grew up in Missouri, lived in Colorado for a time, and ended up in California. And then my mom, you know, coming from folks on the East Coast, ended up in California as well. And so, you know, that's where they met. So I'm a second generation Baha'i. They both came to the faith, you know, later in life. But I mean, I say I'm a second generation Baha'i. Like, even though I've never declared, I still always feel at home. But yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, thank you so much, Narissa. Okay, let's see. Mason, you're up. You and the fam. What?
Oh,
Oh, that's right. You've got your own. So let me get out of here. Forgot. I thought I had you in my lineup.
No worries. I'm going to share my screen real quick. See my picture now?
Can you make it any bigger? I want to know who's got the fro back there.
That's our son Bishop.
Maybe you can click it sideways to show the big picture.
So,
Just make it bigger.
here we'll do, here we go. So I'll just show them separately. This is all of us about 3 years ago, maybe. That's me, my wife Jillian, our son Bishop. There's my sister Nusheen and her husband Eden. There's my dad James, my daughter Lua, Hale, these are my sister's kids, Natasha, Lydia, and my mother. We grew up, well, let me back up. So my father is Black, and my mother is Iranian. She grew up in the northern part of Iran, and in Azerbaijan, in an area, a little town north of Tabriz. So she speaks both Turkish and Farsi, and then learned English along the way also. She came over here in about 1970, 71, and they got married in 72. My father grew up in DC. His family comes from North Carolina. Then his parents moved to New York and then stayed there for a couple years, had one kid, and then came on back down towards DC, and pretty much just stayed here after that. My mom's one of 5 kids and my dad's one of 9. There's both my sister and I from my parents, and then my dad had a first marriage, so we have one other sister also, who's not pictured here. But I grew up in the Baha'i faith, in a suburb of DC, in a town with only about 20,000 people. And just before this, we were trying to look it up and see, you know, what the population of the town was and how the demographics were. And having lived there, I would say there was majority white during the whole 80s and 70s and when I was growing up. By 2000, the population was just about 50-50 almost of, with a few percentages in there of randomness, but it was mostly Black and white. And now at this point in 2010, there were now, at that point, we'll see what happens this year, but there were then a few percentages more Black than white. So there's a changing mode in that town, which when the town was created in 1936 had a rule up that no Blacks were allowed in the town. So it was definitely a change over the years in population and what was allowed. My history growing up, I mean, so my great grandfather was the last in our family to be enslaved. So that was my grandmother's father, who was born in 1861, somewhere around abouts. They had a lot of kids also, tending to the farm and everything else along in those ways in North Carolina. We're still uncovering family history about what went on, why everybody left, what went on with the land and all these kinds of things. There's so many stories that were hidden from us that we're still trying to determine. Some of these things we're just not going to ever figure out because they were not written down. There was so much hurt and pain in the past from all of the ownerships and all of the y'all know what I'm talking about. This stuff it's just there, right? And so all of that led to pain, and all of that led to hiding away some of these things so that we wouldn't have to go and deal with these painful topics and stuff. One thing we did recently find is that one of our ancestors that we've been able to trace through Ancestry was on one of the breeding farms, and she had no less than 36 children that we were able to trace. There's more, I'm sure. So when you start to lay out, when you have that in your direct line, that causes pain for people to even have to think about. And those children went all over the place. You know, they were dispersed to many farms and plantations and stuff. So there's a lot going on in the background there. I grew up kind of a muddled feeling about who I was as an individual. I was more mixed, but also very, very knowing that I was Black. Also, to a certain extent, knowing that I was Persian, but not really. And so a lot of people would call me half and half, or they would call me half Persian and half Black, as if some left part of me was Black and the right part of me was Persian or something. Or you could go and say, well, this is your Persian finger, you know, which was an effort to disenfranchise me from both groups. And they succeeded for many years in doing so. My sister and I both grew up with that kind of feeling of displacement, I think. I think that growing up, I went to a private Montessori school for elementary, where we were only a couple of, I don't know, 4 or 5 Black kids in the school. And then like one Indian kid, another kid from somewhere in Asia, I think, maybe, I'm not even sure. And that was really it. And you know, 97 other white kids. So it was, you know, there wasn't a affinity group that I could go and belong to. I was really on the fringes throughout elementary school. When I went to middle school, and I grew up in Prince George's County in Maryland, which is one of the wealthiest Black counties in the country. So when you have a lot of people there, then you have the chance to now go and going to a public school, I had the chance to interact much more with many more Black people, and then reinvent myself. Now then I had to go and find myself also, because now I have to go and fit in an area with not as much experience going to a school with predominantly Black children in it. And then you have to go and find your way and not get beat up and other kind of things. Because, you know, because now I'm lighter in a school filled with people who are much darker than me for the most part, right? So you end up really still trying to find myself. By the time I got to high school, I had much more gotten my feet under myself. I felt I had a good core group of friends who I could go and identify with more, who weren't really concerned with what I was or anything else. And in fact, I had many other biracial friends at that point who I kind of connected with, I think, more. Going to college kind of blew that away also, but I was still, I think, confused. It wasn't until I went to the Black Men's Gathering at the age of 26 that, you know, we got married, I was 24, and we were having our first kid at that point coming on the way. And my dad had been trying to get me to go to this gathering of Black Bahá'í men getting together. It was a 25-year endeavor. And I got in really at the tail end of it because my father had been trying to get me to go there for years. And I was like, no, I don't know about that. So I finally kind of gave in and went, and it changed my life. You know, walking up there and getting greeted and welcomed and loved from the moment that I stepped out the car, unconditionally. Just, you know, I'm walking up and the first person I see hugs me and gives me a hug like he hasn't seen me before, like he hasn't seen me in 20 years and I've never seen him before, right? And that love, this welcoming, you know, brother, just embracing me. I mean, I'm almost crying and I've just walked in the door, right? And so this kind of love that we had for sitting there together for a week, praying together, sharing our hearts, you know, awakened a new acceptance in my own life to be able to say, you know, I am more than just a half a person. I am fully Black. I am fully a Black man, and I am fully a Persian man. And those are who I am. I don't have to go and say that I'm half of this or half of that. You know, people also confuse me with being Hispanic. They've confused me with being Ethiopian. They've confused me with all kinds of things. You know, I would see often, you know, Iranians who didn't know that they would look at me and not know that I could speak Farsi. And when I was younger, they would often, when I did speak, they would say that I wasn't speaking correct, and use words to denigrate my accent, which I spent a lot of time trying to improve over the years. I think because people made me feel less than for how I formed words. But then you'd also end up with those people around you who would go and start speaking about you, not knowing that you understand everything they're saying, and they talking bad about you. And so then you start to feel worse about yourself, and feeling less than. So that was the kind of the Persian interaction where I never felt included. And I think to this day, I still don't feel included by the Persian culture in general at large, but I refuse to go and accept that. And I just go ahead and say, you know what, I still am Persian and y'all can suck it, because this is my life and I am who I am. And so I'm a part of it. So y'all just go ahead and I'm gonna stick my elbow in here. I'm just gonna shove my way in and I'm gonna be who I am. And so I accepted who I am. If y'all don't feel like accepting me in this grand Persian thing that I am a part of, and I have every right to say that I am a part of, then you can choose to ignore that fact and go over there. But I have chosen to accept that I am who I am. I am Black, I am Persian, and that's where I am. So I think we have our kids feeling, I think, more, I don't know, aloof from the whole thing in many ways. I don't know how they would say that they feel about how they identify. We live in a multicultural area. Our city area that we live in right now has many diverse families within it. It originally was very white years ago, 40 years ago when they developed this area, but now it's much more diverse. So they go to school with a really wide pool of kids. But I'll stop.
How old are your kids, Nason and Jillian?
They are
16, 14, and 9. And we always discuss how that they are Black, Persian, and white, or European American, or however you want to describe it, so that they kind of feel, I don't want them to feel piecemeal like Nason grew up with. And just wanted something I think about, especially as growing up in this country, you know, as a mom, as a mom who's a white mom, so to speak, a white woman, there's a lot of times where people don't think in that position to make sure their kids are connected fully to the full culture pieces. And that's something that I tried very hard to work on myself and recognize where everyone is, so that they fully feel that. And also the dynamics in our relationship of how I recognize how I'm socialized in ways, and I work on that daily so that our marriage can work. Because sometimes people think when there's an interracial marriage that that's going to be hunky-dory and all that, but there's a lot of racial tones and traumas and stuff that come through in the way we're socialized. So being very conscious and working on the racism that I have, the way I'm socialized, is something that I work on daily, so that my kids can be healed, our relationship can get stronger, and we actually have a cohesive, true, unified marriage. That is our goal. And so I'm very, very cognizant of it. Some days I'm better than others. Sometimes some crazy racist thing will come out of my mouth, and I will, as soon as it happens, I'll recognize it. Sometimes he'll call me on it, and I will go and I'll work it through my system. And then it heals that. It's freeing to recognize that, own it, and heal it, versus then pretend it's not there. And I was also raised Baha'i. I'm a second generation Baha'i. I grew up with everybody, and we always had different cultures in our household. So I just wanted to, felt like I had to put that out there to just for the recognition of the work that goes into this. And then also not just within the marriage, but within friend relationships, and the reality of what does it really mean to work towards the true unity of mankind.
Well said. Okay, we're looking for two more people. Have they arrived? I'm looking for, there it is. I see the hair. That's Aaliyah. Aaliyah, you are up next. Let me get your family photo up while you guys get settled there for a minute. They've had a rush day. Some new entrepreneurs and businesses taken off like it's zooming in a huge way. So we're really glad they could break away from fulfilling all their orders and be here with us today. Let me see here, just a second. I was moving stuff around. There we go. Okay. And let me get to, yeah. There we go. Present. Those were my pictures you were looking at. That's more of them. I was beaming up in case they didn't make it in here. Here we go. Oh, whoops. Sorry, that's Marco. All right. There we are. This is Aaliyah. Tell us about you. We're addressing just the first two topics, first two questions, about your family background and the joys and challenges of being who you are.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for accepting us, even though we're late. So I'm Aaliyah, and then this is my husband, Marco, who will talk after. But my background is, this is my immediate family. So my mom is in the middle. We call her the queen, which is why we're holding her. She's African-American. My dad in back of me is half Persian, half white. And then my brother and sisters, and then Marco, and then my brother-in-law in back. I call my siblings, we call each other the quadruplets, because now that we're all older, we just kind of all look the same. But yeah, so my background is, I think I was getting similar hints to what Nason was saying. But I grew up in Zimbabwe for most of my childhood. My family went to go pioneer there for 8 years. And I was there from 1 to 9 years old. And in Zimbabwe, I was the white child. I was the lightest skinned girl in my classroom. I was the American. I was a foreigner. I was an expat. So I was othered, but I always say that I had a certain level of privilege for being white there, and then also for being American. And all the Americans that were at my school just were considered to have a lot of money, had all these opportunities, could go back to the States whenever, which is very different than the Zimbabweans that were at my school. When I was 9, I moved to Redmond, Washington. Redmond, Washington is not known for their Black community. It was very big Caucasian, Indian, and Asian population, because it was like a little tech hub. And all of a sudden, people started looking at me differently. People thought I was very strange. I was different. And in middle school, people started calling me their Black friend. And I just thought that was the strangest thing, because I was white in Zimbabwe, and then all of a sudden I was Black there. And I very much struggled with that immediate shift in how people treated me. And for me, I always just saw the background that I had come from, which was a Baha'i background, Black mom, a white Persian father. And so I think it just took me a while to really take on the role of being Black. And it took a lot of reflecting that your identity is a lot of what people put on you. And I can think whatever I want, but it doesn't change how other people think about me. So every time I step into a new phase in my life, it's kind of a different identity. Even in college, I feel like that was a time where I'm like, I'm going to embrace this, my Black side, and joined the Black Student Union there. And I feel like that's when I finally embraced that part of me, who I was in America, which was a Black woman. And now even owning a business, people are promoting me for being a Black owned business. So really, what does it mean to kind of like anchor myself in that, even though I may have what's the word I'm looking for? Even though I feel like I'm like not Black enough. I know that's like a huge thing, especially when I was in Zimbabwe. I was like, I'm not Black at all here. So just like embracing that. And I feel like the Baha'i community for me was that like common place that I had throughout my life. And so I feel like before anything, just identified as Baha'i, because that was the common threshold and the common place or familiarity that I had with others before my race. So yeah, that's my story. Do you have any other questions?
Okay, we'll come to those later. Marco, tell us about you, your family, and some of the joys and challenges of being who you are.
There's a lot to unpack looking at this picture.
Go right ahead.
So I am half Persian, half Chadian. I think the simplest way to I don't even know where to start. So I answered those questions, but now saying it out loud changes. Okay, so in this picture, the simplest way to start is I'm in the middle, I'm the Black guy. Then my biological mom is above me. My adopted mom is top right. My adopted dad is to the right of me. My half sister is to the left of me. Her biological father is not in this picture, but my biological mom's husband is in the bottom right, and he's Chinese. He's also on this call. I think they're all here. Yep. And then Flora and Anayat, who are the people that introduced my biological mom to my adoptive parents, are the Persian woman to the top left and the guy below me. So how did this all happen? I guess the simplest way is just to say it exactly as it is, because I don't know how to. My biological mom had me when she was attending Maxwell International Baha'i School. I was adopted immediately because of the Baha'i community. So Flora and I introduced her to my parents, my adoptive parents, and then that whole adoption happened. But as you can see, I appear African-American. I was raised with a Black mom, a white European dad, and a lot of Persian family with half sister that looks white for the most part. Not so much anymore. She looks more Persian now, but yeah. So I think, what does that look like for me growing up? I didn't really know where the lines were for family. Everybody was family, I think, for a long time. We moved to China when I was 2 and came back when I was 6, or maybe 3 when I was 6, like whatever. I was there for 3 years or so. But then I was the only Black person in China. So I was clearly Black, but I didn't have a Black identity. I was a child. And the only Black person I knew was my mom. And then whenever we were back in Canada, that's when I would see my Persian family. But when I came back, I was also a Black kid at a white school with a Chinese accent when he read. So I was like third culture kid is like an understatement. There was like multiple layers of this. So yeah, I mean, I think just growing up in Canada, I think I struggled with identity for a long time. And I don't know like when it really got resolved or if it really did, but yeah, as Aaliyah was saying, as I got older, my friends started, in China, people told me to go back to Africa. And then when I got back, went to Canada, everybody thought it was cool that I was Black, but only superficially, but not actually as like a friend. So there's this whole like weird, you don't belong, but you kind of do. And my friends were like white, and some white kids and some Jewish kids. And then I eventually went to Maxwell as a boarding school student. And that's kind of where I started meeting more like African American kids, African kids. And then I was like, okay, so I am Black. But I think essentially this whole thing is that I'm living in this like multi-cultural family, which looks like this, which is fascinating and amazing. And also I think gave me a lot of flexibility or the ability to connect with people as an adult, like regardless of their cultural or social background, but also I think I agree with Aaliyah saying that your identity is oftentimes placed on you by other people's perceptions of who you are and what they expect you to be. But I've also been able to navigate fluidly between the different cultures that I've been a part of, because they haven't always been at arm's reach. They're all very much wound up in who I am. Yeah, and then you asked about like the joys and challenges. I mean, I think it's all very challenging, but I also don't feel like it isn't a thing that I'm struggling with actively or had ever actively struggled with. I think it was too interwoven with everything else that was like growing up, like adolescence, what is going on, becoming an adult, dating, like all of the things are always trying to navigate your ethnic identity, your cultural identity in every one of those moments, but it hasn't been a thing that is on at least not often at the forefront of what I'm dealing with. It just informs a lot of choices that I've had to make.
Thank you, Marco. Awesome. Okay, friends, we have heard from each of our presenters. And if I can get off my screen share here. Okay, there we go. All right, great to see everybody again. What we're going to do in this second half is look at some of the other questions. First, I want to ask, for those of you, and whether you were on the panel or not, but if you have a youth or a younger person who is bi or multiracial, and they want to say something, whether you're on the panel or not, if they'd like to share some of their experience, we'd really like to hear from you guys. I see some conversation going on over there at Anissa's and David's. Possibly someone will speak up. That beautiful young person over there I see. That's one I see. Anyone else? Any of the young people, and you can just come off mute and tell us your name and tell us what you want to say. And if mom and dad are there with you, they can help you out. No problem. And you can always join in the conversation at any time that you want to as well.
Well, I'll go ahead and introduce my family.
Okay.
So starting with Marco, who just spoke. So Marco is my birth son and happy to, thank you, Regina, for inviting me to this. This is wonderful. Behind me is Sahara, Marco's sister, and this is my husband, David. And come here, Sabella. This is Sabella in the picture. This is wonderful. We, clearly, as you can see, we have quite an interracial, multiracial family. And myself, yeah, so I'm just, I love being in these conversations and really to really understand better what I can do to make the world a better place, but also in how to support my children with their identity. I was telling Marco last week when we were talking, I was saying, I remember when he was a teenager and he wanted to move from Canada to LA, and I just did not understand it. And it's taken me basically, what is that, at least a decade to get to the point that, oh, okay, I get it. I get why he wanted to do that so badly. And he talked to him, he goes, well, my mom knew exactly why I wanted to move. So, and so this is a wonderful part about, our experiences really inform our choices.
So what did you come to understand? What did you finally get about him wanting to move from Canada to LA? What exactly was that?
He wanted to be with people that he could relate to. I don't know, Marco, maybe you can talk about that. I don't know if I get that or not, but I think at first I just thought, oh, he's, just wants a change. But I see now that, race has informed a lot of his decisions throughout his life. And it's something that I didn't expect. Because we've all been in such a multiracial environment. It was blended for me in my perspective. And now I see that, no, it's not. As Nathan said, I love that you said, I'm fully Black and I'm fully Persian. And I see that in Marco, right? He's fully Black, he's fully Persian. Whatever that means for his Persian upbringing. He's also fully white because his adoptive dad is white. So yeah, just lots to learn. Shirley, nice to see you.
You
and
too,
Nice
Anissa.
to see you. I don't know if you remember me.
Oh, yes, of course I do. Absolutely. Absolutely. Marco, did you want to respond to that?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I think I didn't see it as like, I think that Anissa's right in the way of saying, like, I was trying to find people that looked like me, experienced the same things as me. And like in Canada, there was nobody. I mean, I was the only Black person I knew. And the only other Black people I knew were playing caricatures of Black people. So, which was like also not a really interesting, it's like hard to build relationships with those types of people because they were also Black people. They were like mixed race, maybe Black, or their parents were both mixed, but they grew up in Canada and they had a perception of what being African American was, and were really living that out as a whole family, which was also not, it was like, it's like playing the role of the Black family in your community, like whatever you would see on a sitcom or something, right? It was like a little weird. I mean, I like dabbled in what that, like those relationships, and they just never really worked out because I just wasn't, it felt inauthentic. But yeah, moving to LA was mostly that, like, I wanted to meet people who being Black was not meet them, but really have relationships with people and be able to go, like, fly under the radar, like go somewhere and not have people look at me because I'm Black, or not have to do the thing, which I don't think many, I mean, Black people do this, but Black people only do this in white areas, is when you see another Black person, you have to nod and like shake their hand and see them. You're like, oh my God, I'm like, there have been multiple experiences with my mom driving. Like, I remember we were driving to Vancouver one time and this car was like racing beside us on the freeway. And we're like, what's going on? Like, it was weird because I was driving, I just got my driver's license, and this car is like coming up and we look over, and it's a Black guy waving, biggest smile I've ever seen. Like, oh my God, it's like I've never seen another Black person before. And that was, you know, those are nice moments, but they're also not how you want to live you don't want to have
Right.
people that look like you be such an exception that it is an event every time you see somebody. I want to be able to go somewhere and be what I want it to be, or who I want it to be. And so, yeah.
Well said.
That adds more color to it, but it was just, yeah.
Well said. And it's those kind of experiences that really bring it home to people, you know, what it's like to be different, you know, or to be the other, you know, somewhere. Let's turn it for a minute, and then we'll completely open it up to whatever you guys want to ask or share. Let's talk about parenting. The Nasons have kids. Anissa has kids. Karen has kids. And anyone else that I may have forgotten or haven't seen yet. But for those of you, you know, that have had to navigate for your children, let's talk about that experience and share some of those insights and things you've gleaned, because I know that would be very helpful to everyone, parents and not. Again, because it gives us another perspective, you know, on what it's like to be, I really love Narissa's phrase, racially ambiguous, or maybe not, right? You know, depending on how dark or light you are, you know, what have you. So would anyone like to jump in with that? Karen? Okay, go ahead.
Do you still have that picture of my two boys?
Yes, I do.
I'm gonna flash it up real quick. My youngest is
Yes.
20 and my oldest is 32. And just so you know who I'm talking about.
Yep, there they are.
There they are. Those are my two sons.
Mm-hmm.
The oldest is Ian and the youngest is Casey. And one of the things that I think is really important is that sometimes you have to be prepared as a parent, because their father's white, so they're also very racially mixed as well, like their mom. You have to be, in my opinion, I've had to be what I call a warrior, because I have really had to fight the good fight, not only for myself, but for my children in the private schools and the public schools that they've attended. My oldest son learned very quickly that if you don't fit into a particular racial stereotype, people don't know what to do with you regardless of what race they are. He was the #1 student academically in his class. That's not how Black males were framed at his school. You're either a comedian, or you're an athlete, or you're a bad boy. And he quickly found out that being uniquely who he was, which is a scholar, who also happens to be racially mixed and who also happens to identify African American, there was no place for that. And I don't know if a lot of people realize that unless they are raising children of color, that it's not always name calling, you know, it's not always being completely left out. It can also have everything to do with presenting yourself in a way that they really don't have a whole lot of experience with. And they have a lot of prejudices that get unearthed because now they're looking at this Black kid or racially mixed kid who's the scholar in his class. So I've always had to kind of be on top of my toes. My youngest son really had to deal with a lot of prejudice from teachers. And it was just a school system that was just rife with everything that a lot of you are aware of, and I don't need to go into that. But I had to always be ready to, with dignity and with courtesy, and lower my fire a little bit, because some things were absolutely ridiculous and just racist. I had to be prepared to stand up for them and to model what it looks like to not just put up with something just because the system is bigger than I am. So I don't know. I just think that that helped them to know that they had a mom, you know, who was willing to talk to the teachers, talk to the administration, stand up for it. But I have to tell you, between my own life and theirs, there's been a whole lot of having to stand up to things and really rely on Baha'u'llah for the energy to do that with some grace.
Right. Anyone else?
I'd like to share a couple little things that I didn't have a chance to mention earlier.
Yeah.
It sounds like my family has you guys on in the other room. Sorry for the echo.
Oh, we don't hear it.
Oh,
You're
good. We're big fans in this house. We got you on multiple screens. Anyways, I wanted to share because it ties in nicely with what Karen and Marco were talking about. So we moved 2 years ago. Jamila and I raised Jamila by myself for the first 12 years of her life. And we moved from Minnesota, from the exact neighborhood where the George Floyd incident happened, just a few blocks away, to New York City 2 years ago. And so tying into, I can very much affirm, and I'll just keep it short, what Marco was talking about when Jamila landed in Washington Heights, New York City. She was like, Mom, I can pass for Dominican here. And she thought it was the coolest thing ever. She was like, there is every shade of woman in this neighborhood. And she loves it because when she walks on the street, nobody is trying to figure her out because every race is in our neighborhood. And especially my husband pointed out when he moved in last year was that within the Hispanic, especially Hispanic neighborhoods, the racial colorism is like, or the color span of Hispanic community is huge, and you have every shade. And so for Jamila being mixed in a predominantly Hispanic, even though we don't speak any Spanish, that's a little bit hard, but we should learn. She loves to pass in that environment. So I didn't know how amazing, I had idea that it might be kind of cool for Jamila to live in New York City, but I really, I'm glad that we made the move at her age 12 to such a diverse neighborhood and with so many opportunities. And then what I was a little bit sad to share with you guys is that what Karen talked about in terms of having to fight for her boys, this systemic racism is still very, Jamila was sharing with me all kinds of positive things for tonight. She was like, when I go to Baha'i events, I feel like I can be Persian and English and British and Black. So Jamila had a lot of positive things to share, to be honest. But as a mom from a systemic, trying to raise her in the environment in America, I had to fight for her so much, and especially in Minnesota. In New York, she has Black teachers in the schools advocating for her, and our advisor who's helping her get into a high school is African American, and a college advisor. It's just not a weird, not a special thing. It's just normal in New York City. But in Minnesota, I had to be they'd be like, she's doing great. She's got C's, she's doing great. And I'm like, she's an A student. You don't need to lower the grades for her to be she's, so all of that Karen was sharing made me just want to point out to everyone that the systemic racism is very much still there in much of America. And that was very much a reality for me raising Jamila in Minnesota. And I have different challenges in New York, but very much so in Minnesota. I had to remember that they were lowering expectations for her for sure.
Anybody else? And friends, if you want to put comments or questions in the chat, you're free to do so if you'd like. If you don't want to, speak up, or if we get too rowdy and start stepping over each other or something in our rush to get in on the conversation. And while we take just a short minute for people to ponder some things, let me just share one or two things that are in the chat now. And this is from Diane, and I think she's still here and she might want to speak to this in more detail. But she says, my daughters are Black, white, biracial, and now are in their early to mid 30s. I will never forget a conversation we had when my older daughter was in high school, and she said that she felt racially ambiguous. Diane, are you still here? You want to
I am still here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Well, I really had a
Oh, and let me encourage you, friends, to go on speaker view so you can see who's actually speaking. Otherwise, you get these little boxes, and it's much nicer to see the full face of the person. So if you go on speaker view, you can see who's talking. Thank you, Diane. You can come off mute, Diane.
Okay, there I am. Okay.
There you are.
All right, great. I was just thinking about as our girls, our girls were born and as they were growing up, they were born and grew up in Southern West Virginia, where there's very little racial diversity in the state in general. West Virginia is about 97% white and 3% African American and other, it's that 1%. But as they were growing up, my husband is from outside of Chicago. He's white. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, and is an African American. We wanted to give them a rich variety of experiences with both our families growing up and as Baha'is growing up, and those sorts of things. They had friends from different racial backgrounds, but by the time they got into high school, my older daughter especially talked about feeling racially ambiguous in a way. And I gave them a book to read that I had used to teach my class. It was called Beyond Black, Biracial Identity in America. Where it talked about 5 different ways that a person could identify as being biracial, Black, white. And they say, oh, I feel like this, I feel like that. And we wanted them to feel comfortable in their own skin as they grew up. One daughter feels transcendent, one feels more border, but they know that they're loved for who they are in their own skin. But it's been quite a journey for them. And when Kat and I had the conversation, she talked about feeling racially ambiguous, that she could close one eye and see through one lens and open the other and see through another lens and understand both points of view. That was an awesome conversation. And then growing up as Baha'is, and that spiritual identity was the most important thing we wanted to anchor for them.
Mm-hmm.
So. Yeah.
Thank you, Diane.
All right.
Parviz and Terry, they'd like to make a comment. Parviz and Terry, they're our friends from New Orleans.
Yes, hi, everybody.
Hi.
I just wanted to make a comment, share a little story that in some sense is sad, some sense is funny. What Narisa earlier said about if she had, like, a kinkier hair, she might have been identified as something else, or if she was, something like that. But as you can tell, probably, I'm Persian, and my wife Terry is Black, American Black.
Here.
Yeah. So we have 3 kids, and this goes back, 30, 40 years ago. So they are, when our kids they all went to public school system. And so the first, our daughter, our oldest child, when the first day of school, I took her to school. And so we finished registration and so forth. And of course, there's a form that the federal government, I guess, still do. I don't know, that time they did anyway. Keep track of ethnicity and race. And so the person in charge over there just, fill out the form, marked it as, so she's identified in the school system as white. They just looked at me and they just as marked white.
Right.
And so our second child, son, Anis, when Terry took him to school, and he's identified there as on the form as Black, a Negro.
Actually, in Louisiana at that time, the child was considered the race of the mother.
Right. Yeah.
And we never put down the race of our children because And so when I went to get a permit for a niece for school, I knew that that was going to be a question. And just before the person was done, she got a phone call. So I kind of said goodbye and thought, I didn't have to answer that question. And so then she calls out, Mrs. Mojgani, what's the race? And I said, you can make it whatever you like. I'm not choosing who, which parent is it going to be? So she said, so she called somebody and got the ruling on that. So our first child is white. Our second child is Black.
And our third child, I don't know how it came about, but
he's Asian Pacific Islander.
Right, yeah.
So we have three
Elaine,
children.
She's with you.
3 children, same parents, all 3 different races.
And what Terry was saying is, as far as choosing, it speaks to what Nason was saying earlier, that it's very hard, they expect for you to deny part of your heritage by picking, by choosing to be Black or white or Persian or whatever. So that's that part of what Nason was speaking about really talked to me. And the other thing was that his experience at Black Men's Gathering, our older son also attended that, and
our Black child.
Yeah, Black child.
We figured that.
And his experience in going there and being, when he entered Green Acre and being met with love was really moving as he related back to us.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you, how has it been, how have your children identified themselves, and have they accepted these identities, or how do they see themselves and amongst each other?
Go on.
I think sometimes I think I've been a failure as a Black parent. That our children, I think, are really rather racially ambiguous. They've come up with their own designation. They're blursions. Okay. And I think basically their identity has really been shaped by the faith. As Baha'is, I don't think that it ever, I'm not sure that there was ever a great impact racially outside. For one thing, even though they went to public schools, they were schools that were very racially, ethnically, and nationally diverse. So they didn't stand out, if you will. In any way. They had Black friends, they had white friends, they had friends whose parents were here for a year or two. So, so I think that all 3, as they have gotten older, they have become more.
I think our sons are becoming more Black.
More concerned with race. Our daughter deals with the racial issues at work and has helped in establishing programs at work, because she works in public health and there isn't a lot, there's not a lot of racial diversity. And so she has kind of, it's her mission, if you will. And so all 3 have all of these aspects. I mean, they have these Persian aspects to their lives and these Black aspects. And somehow there doesn't seem to be a great disconnect. Of course, one thing is that they're older than I think all of the children I've seen here tonight. They're in the 36 to 46 age range. And so while they've had to deal with all of that, it's not like it is today. So, and not like it was when I was a kid. So it's they kind of got that in between.
Okay, that's wonderful. You know, you've opened up a whole new aspect to the conversation. I think Dominique and Jamila want to say something about that. You had something in the chat, or do you just want me to read the chat, Dominique?
No, I'm just being silly in the chat.
Oh, well, that's okay.
Please
Well,
ignore me. I'm just being silly.
no, that wasn't silly at all.
What, that Jamila could be a British blursion?
Yeah. Is that what you call blursion, right? Blursion for Brit and
Yep.
Persian.
And she wants to come down to New Orleans and learn about that too, about Louisiana too, because she fully embraces that her dad is from Louisiana. He's from Baton Rouge. And so
okay.
anything Louisiana, she's all about.
She wants to hear about it, huh?
I
Okay.
think that if I can put them on the spot, I feel like Nason and Jillian probably have a lot to share about how they get their kids to like fully embrace all of that. I know in our house, it's a lot of like food and language, and Jamila gets to travel back and forth to England because I still have family there. So she gets to pick up these pieces of her cultures.
Right.
But I know, Nason, you guys were like touching on some of the things that you do with your kids.
Yeah,
like
and
get them to.
They've put some stuff in the chat box there. So yeah, Nason, why don't you and Jillian tell us about how nothing's changed over the years?
Yeah, and I can call out Bishop is on also, so if he wants to speak,
hey Bishop,
you're welcome to speak up too. But they're
absolutely.
Bill went to register them all. I think you registered all three.
I registered all three, and I checked the same boxes because they don't have a mixed section, but they say check all that apply. Like they don't make you just stay with one at this point. And I checked the same for all three, and yeah, they decided which one goes on their record though. And I thought it was interesting that Bishop was Black and Hale was the Asian Pacific Islander one, whatever, and then Lua was white. And I was like, why did they choose that for which ones? You know, it's just very interesting.
Yeah.
And I do wonder, I mean, living in this area, like there is a little bit more diverse, like the teachers that they have and, you know, in terms of having Black teachers or, you know, a little bit, there's a little bit more of that, though not as much as we may want still. I don't know, like in the school system, there's times when I've had to have discussions with teachers for sure. More so with Bishop than the girls for sure. Like definitely more with Bishop. I think that there's been more, and I don't know if Bishop wants to say anything because he's on, he's not aware of all the conversations I've had, you know, at times that we've got it a little bit. But I don't know. I mean, like, I think it's just being open and we have open discussions about all this stuff and have since they were little.
Also.
Even when they were young. And I remember when Hale was, I don't know, she was 3 and she was so upset about her hair and how she wishes she was beautiful. And like, yeah, just her curly hair, like it was like a thing. Like we had to have these conversations from very young.
Yeah.
And they definitely have, we definitely go to the Persian family stuff and eat Persian food, and they understand the history of their family on that side. And then also from their dad, from Nason's dad's side, we do Christmas dinners with them, have Thanksgiving. Like we try to stay very connected to all the sides of the family as best we can. And of course, my family. So I think we just try to stay connected to the family and try to talk about the stories and the history. I mean, I think history is important to know, family history as well as general history, you know, but.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I do want to ask, you know, Bishop, was that you at Bahá'í school this summer and you told the story about when you were playing basketball and somebody called you out for the shot you didn't make? Was that you, Bishop?
You need to unmute Bishop.
You need to unmute Bishop.
He was unmuted.
Oh, I couldn't hear him.
Me either, but he was unmuted. Unmute Bishop.
Speak up a little bit.
Was that you?
Check your mic, Bishop. You might have the wrong one selected.
I think it was Nuri.
It was Nuri?
Yeah, Kate and Bernard Songer Johnson's.
Okay, he's typing. Okay, that was not him. Okay, thanks, Bishop. Bishop, do you want to share anything about what it's like, you know, being in your own peer group? Is it an issue for kids that you hang out with or in your school at all? Do you get any kind of negative stuff or positive stuff coming at you because of how you look?
We're going to have him come to this computer.
Okay, great. Okay, that would be wonderful, because it's really important for us to hear, you know, from the younger folks too. Because as we can see from generation to generation, it's not always the same stuff. It just keeps permutating. Hey, Bishop. Anything you'd want to tell us about what it's like in your life?
I guess it doesn't really make that much of a difference aside from one or two different things that happened that weren't completely specific to me. It was more general, I guess.
Okay. Did it affect you though in any way?
Not really, no, because I just mostly ignored it.
Okay. But it was something that you needed to ignore though.
Yeah.
You had to make that decision.
I mean,
okay.
Most of the time people just assume I'm black and white and move on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a testament of where we live.
Right. There's a group of people in this area of different backgrounds, so I think you may blend in more than if we lived in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks, Bishop. It's good to see you. Okay, we do have some people in the chat that would like to ask some questions. Boy, I'm gonna really mispronounce your name. It looks like Nuri Kingsley. Is that right? Are you here, Nuri?
Yes, Nuriel, as you can see, my name is Nuriel Kingsley, and you can see that it's Indonesian and non-Indonesian name.
Okay, wonderful.
Hi, Cheryl. Thank you so much.
Hi.
So I'm Indonesian, and my husband is Caucasian American. And it's, you know, listening to all the parents shared, it really encouraged me to want to share. I think it's different light of being parents as Indonesian. Two of our daughters were born in Indonesia, and then the law in Indonesia is that children must follow the father's nationality.
Mm.
And though, you know, I'm Indonesian and they were born in Indonesia. So there were, we were in Indonesia, but we have to get visa for our children. But then we moved to the US 2001. And moving here, I feel the separation. I feel like I'm not, you know, I need to, I need to step up to be like American mom, you know, because all mom, they, you know, all the moms around where we used to live, you know, they have their children do piano lessons, do basketball, all kind of activities after school. And I didn't really do much of those. And I always felt that I need to be more like American moms so that the kids can be proud of me. However, so I, you know, later on I learned that, you know, that's not what they needed. And I could see that, you know, in school, my children, all my children were kind of have all friends from all different nationalities, background. And I thought that, oh, they're doing well. Oh, great. They're really, you know, adjusting really well. So only later on when they become older, they share that wasn't easy. So my understanding of, you know, being a parenting as a multiracial family wasn't really, you know, wasn't really strong enough. So only later on that I learned that actually it wasn't easy for my children. It wasn't just because I need to be more American. And I didn't have any reference, and my reference was, you know, my husband's family and my neighbors. So it's just really, really a lot of learning. And actually, so my daughter is right there on the other screen somewhere there.
What's her name?
Elisa Kingsley. I would love to hear her take on this, because I always wonder like whether I'm, you know, I always feel like I need to be more. I'm not enough, you know. So very so different from what everyone has shared. So it was really learning for me to hear what everyone has shared.
Thank you. Elisa, would you like to share? Your mom's putting you on the spot, I know, so it's really up to you. You don't have to respond or share if you don't want to.
I guess I could share, I guess I could kind of just share my reflections from what I'm learning from this space.
That would be wonderful.
I think there was a point raised, my mom and I have been like texting low-key, but there was a point raised earlier about like identifying as like half this, half that versus embracing like the wholeness of like one like cultural or racial identity. And I think I guess that's something that's very like I feel like around the world it is a new thing that's being learned, including in Indonesia. So like my Indonesian family is like still sort of like, I'm 24 years old and it's still like a learning process for everyone, including like my younger cousins who are like between 10 to 18. But I was sort of thinking like, it could even just be, because there was another point too that was raised about like your identity is sort of what's placed on you by others. So like one could, like I am very fortunate that I do recognize certain characteristics of myself that are very Indonesian influence that I'm very proud of. But maybe that's not recognized by others. And so something that I don't see myself as is placed on me. But then like, I think one thing that I'm trying to learn to do is like using or developing like the right language to sort of, I guess, not correct is such a strong word, but like inform people or just like express like, you know, like this is how I identify myself, or like, you know, I can be Indonesian, but, you know, not have 50% or like not have 100% Indonesian genetics, whatever that means. So yeah, so that's like one thing that I think is an area of learning for myself is just like making use of language to really redefine like human identity. And I think the faith is really helpful in that regard, because like we know that our true identity is like our spiritual identity. So, you know, even when it gets difficult to sort of associate yourself with like the Indonesian part or the white part, we can sort of turn, like I know that I could turn back to like, you know, who my character and like my spiritual qualities to sort of re-energize myself, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I just say something real quick?
Who is that? Oh, Samara? Yes. Well, I have some other people in line.
Okay. I just want to say hello to Nuriel. Ako tinggal di Indonesia. I grew up in Indonesia. My parents moved there during the time.
I know you. We saw in the Holy Land. I saw you.
Right.
Okay, you can connect on chat privately if you like as well. So that's wonderful. Samira is always meeting someone here. She's always finding new friends. That's awesome. Okay, we had Doug's, D-O-U-G-S, Doug's would like to ask a question from all the wonderful parents here about schooling. Doug's, and it's D-O-U-G-S, is how your name is appearing. Are you still here? Let's give him a minute. I'm looking. Oh.
Unmute yourself. Yes, we are sorry for that. I was with my husband. Doug is my husband. I don't know why his name has an S at the end of it. The last name is S. Perhaps somehow it got that. He had to rush to a devotional that he is a part of it with the Navajo friends. But as I explained, first of all, thank you so much for this unbelievably wonderful, uplifting, eye-opening, and educational experience you gave us today. I am a grandmother of a mix. I'm Persian. My husband is Caucasian American. We spend most of our life in Francophone Africa. Our daughter, who was born there in West Africa, had obviously lots of different exposure and always considered herself more African, even though to her dismay, she is very white looking. And she had a lot of difficulties, I think, when she came before college and getting to college in US. And her husband is African American, who is not a religious person. He is actually agnostic. And so their beautiful 6-year-old daughter, they don't want to send her to school because they're very worried about all the difficulties she may encounter as a mixed person. She's brilliant and she's aware of herself and her difference. And so they actually are wonderful parents, but my husband and I are very concerned about depriving her to be in the society. They're, the father, especially, both of them are almost to the, I don't want to use the fanaticism, but they're very much against all the miseducation, all the mistakes in the curriculum, in American curriculum, and all how they represent the history and all of that, which we agree that is definitely not right, but they don't want to send her to school. So we have this little problem. I was very pleased to hear Elisa how beautifully explain that her true identity is her spiritual being and her belief in oneness of humankind. And that has helped her so much. For them not being, my daughter not being active Baha'i, and her husband definitely against all the religions that she believes is the white people's religion. It's a very hard situation. I just wanted to receive a little bit of feedback from the young parents.
Okay.
The good things we can tell them lovingly to help them.
Right. Okay, friends. Elaine.
I can. Yeah, my am I allowed to share the picture of my kids?
Yeah, let me bring it. Oh, do I have it?
Oh, I can, here we
You
go.
can share.
Oh, good, awesome.
The two girls, one on the right and one in the middle.
Uh-huh.
So I have, and then one on the left is their first cousin.
Okay.
But those are my girls. And so one is 9 now, and then one is 6. And what I've done is I make sure that I keep tabs on what they're learning in school. And all the time, not in a helicopter parent kind of a way, but with a social justice lens.
Yeah.
So I see how they're learning about Indigenous people. I keep an eye out for how they're learning about Martin Luther King Day. What are they learning about things that I didn't learn about in a correct way when I was growing up. And so I just have to stay really engaged and buy them supplemental materials. I teach them about women's rights. I teach them about colorism. I mean, they're just 6 and 9, but we always talk about, not in using the phrase, but like light skin privilege. Like we are lighter than a lot of people. We are darker than a lot of people at their school. And we talk about what it means to just interact and how important it is to love each other, to be with kind kids, like to be a kind kid and to be around other kind kids, to call out injustice, like bullying is injustice in their world. And it's not so bad. I mean, their school is really good. It's a public school. I'm all about public school so that we can try and help the schools be better. Also, and I stay engaged. Honestly, the biggest problem I have is with other parents, which is kind of ridiculous, but it's the prejudice that other parents have towards me or towards my kids. So it's not during the school day. So I've had to try and stay engaged in these circles, PTA circles and stuff like that.
Right.
When the PTA has activities, my husband and I have told our girls to basically take up space. We are one of the only people of color, families of color in our school area. And I know once it was, what was it? Walk to school day or something like that. Walk to school day. And my kids can walk to school. But the way that we live in a segregated community, and there is a handful of kids who are mostly from Central America, immigrant refugee families, and they mostly take the bus to school from a neighborhood outside of our area. So this is busing in our community. And then we have wealthy white people. And then we, praise God, right? We won a housing lottery where we got to live in this area. We just see it as God telling us to stay here and to try and make a difference. Anyway, so we won this housing lottery where we get to live in this house, in this area by school. And my child walked to school, and the parents there were they just stood there looking at her, standing there to try to get her little stamp that proved that she walked to school. And she was standing there and they just ignored her. And it reminded me of growing up in this area too, where people of color are seen as by the white people as like the help and people who are ignored. Like, we haul your trash, we clean your house, whatever. And it's time to get over that. So I told my kids, and my daughter then at the time, no, you'd say, I'm here. I am here and I want my stamp. And so my kids, they are loud. And now it's funny. So I grew up to be meek and humble. My mom is, I feel like crying when I talk about my mom. She lives with us too. So she's like right here. But my mom, she immigrated from Tonga over here, and she's like, don't stir the pot, like don't cause problems, like just do your work work and get ahead in life. And that works for a while, but when you're from here and you know that you can get more if you speak up, you take up space. And it's just a funny little thing. Like my kids, they used to, you know, draw pictures of like little princesses and stuff. And my youngest daughter brought me this picture the other day, and I was like, what is that? And she went, it's a werewolf warrior queen, Mom. I don't draw princesses. She's taking care of the bullies. And I was like, oh yes, like you're my daughter. Like, yeah, you know, take up that space kind of thing. But you know, it's parental involvement, you know, and watch out for the other parents.
Thank you, Elaine. Karen, you wanted to respond to that also? And then we're going to have just a short announcement and then we'll continue.
Okay. I don't have children in school now, finally, through college and all of that. But things change, the dangers change. The children aren't a threat when they're little. But as soon as they hit middle school and kids start to go through puberty, it is so interesting how parents start to get worried about who's going to date who. And I cannot believe the pressure that was put on kids to separate along religious lines, along racial, cultural lines. And then by the time my children went through high school, they were segregated in cultural groups. This was true in the private schools here. It's true in the public schools. I don't think there's a school yet that is worthy of our children being educated there. I'm just going to be honest. I come from a long line of educators. And so we have to work with what we have, right? And so to me, it's all about choosing the village that you want to raise your children. You got to choose them. You know, you've got to find like-minded people. That's what we did. We had to find like-minded people to help us assist them in the areas that the schools were lacking in. And we had to also help our children understand that they had to be armed with a particular mindset because they are literally under assault when they go to school, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. From the attitudes of the administration, the attitudes of the teachers, you know, the stereotypical thinking, the bullying of the kids. I mean, it's just, I mean, when I think about the quagmire I was sending my children to, only prayers and I don't know, that warrior thing I was talking about got me through. But at the end of the day, it's all the supplemental things we do, and it's the village we create around them to reinforce what we're teaching them at home. And that's what made the difference. Other mentors. And I would love to see the Baha'i community become even more effective in that arena. Because sometimes when our children are going through all of their identity issues spiritually as well, you know, I'm third generation Baha'i. I was a Baha'i kid, a Baha'i teenager, a Baha'i young person. Now I'm a Baha'i 60-year-old. And you go through all kinds of changes spiritually yourself. We need spiritual mentors alongside those that help guide our children academically and socially. So let's raise the village and just realize that that's what you have to do, because really there's more that you have to protect them from than anything they're going to get out of any of these educational systems, I'm sorry to say.
Thank you, Karen. Just a quick announcement, and then we're going to continue. And I want you to know that Jessica has made a couple of comments in the chat, and so I'm going to ask her if she'd like to share those with us and get in the conversation. And then it will be Samira, and then Parviz and Terry. We're past 9:30, it's almost 10 o'clock. Formally, we're here till 9:30. We stay on, you know, usually quite a while after that. It's going to be kind of short tonight because I've got a very full day tomorrow and evening. But I can hang out with you guys at least for another hour. So if you'd like to stay, by all means, please do. I just wanted to tell you what our two topics are coming up in December. And of course, you'll get these on email too. On December 12th, we're having a conversation with Celeste Dixon titled Justice. We Are Not Confused. about what that means. And really looking forward to that one. I look forward to all of them, let me tell you. And we had a break, a 3-week break, because we only meet the second and fourth Saturday of the month. And man, I was really missing you guys. It's like, wow, this has been too long. And I looked at my calendar, it's like, oh, I didn't know we had a 3-week break from October to November. And then on December 26th, this is going to be a very, very fascinating presentation by Dr. Layli Maparyan. And it's entitled Wakandans Meet Baha'u'llah. So, yeah, Shelley's liking that one. You go, girl. Yeah, I'm telling you. So you all know where Wakanda is, right? This is a space for learning. Okay, so if you don't know, it's okay to say so. We'll happily tell you. The subtitle is What Africanity and the Baha'i Faith Have in Common, is what she's going to be describing. And then in January, we have Love, a Force of Transformation, followed by Dr. Angelita Reyes, who will be talking about the pandemic as a portal to race, caste, and new approaches to constructive resilience. She's an emeritus professor from the University of Arizona. And those two will be in January, and we're looking forward to scheduling folks starting February, March, and so on. So I just wanted to let you know about those. If we have any folks here who may be wondering why we're talking about race so much, is because it is the most vital and challenging issue to this country and to the world. And the reason for that is, and this is why we're focusing on this so much in the Baha'i communities in particular, not just because of George Floyd, it's always been a focus of the Baha'i faith, but until humanity as a whole, until we start treating each other as human beings, until we start treating each other with true justice, we're never going to progress. We're always going to be caught in this morass. And yes, we need structural and institutional racism challenged and broken down and broken up by legislation, policies. All of that has to happen. But we also have to change human hearts and minds, because if I don't like your law, I'm not going to follow it. I'm going to try and get away from it, or I'll get around it. And if we look at racism from a very broad perspective, it keeps permutating. We got the Civil Rights Act. Now, what happened to that all of a sudden? It's been stripped. So racism is something that is constantly moving and permutating. And the only thing that's going to stop that continual ability to be so insidious and slippery is to change the hearts and minds of humanity. And that is what we focus on, is that unity and diversity. We love ourselves the way we are, as people, what we look like, how we think. We're all different. God has been wonderful in creating such a diverse world for us, the natural world, everything. And so, we're kind of, we're supposed to be as high as creation. We're really missing the mark on the big issue, which is our common humanity, that we're one human race. So that's why we spend a lot of time talking about race. And that's why this series is about race, because we're not going to have the material and spiritual prosperity that we are capable of having for every human being until we get this right. And it's going to take a long time, and everyone needs to do whatever they can do and with their own capacities towards that goal. And that's what we're about here. So thank you. I just wanted to bring that out because someone did ask a question about that. Okay, so let's go back to the chat. Jessica, Did you want to share some of your comments, or would you like me to just read them out?
I'll just share the one that's most important. Thank you, Charlene.
Sure.
So Ruth Foreman, who's a poet and author and ninja woman, is a Baha'i who lives here in DC and is from LA, who many of you probably know. And she is publishing some children's books coming up. And one of them is being released like a month from now. She's publishing through Simon & Schuster, so it should be in all the bookstores and on Amazon and easy to get, but it's called Curls. And it's specifically for girls of color. And it's like, I've only seen the front cover, but it looks amazing. And then I think next year, I don't know if it's in the spring or maybe later, she's will be publishing a book called Glow. That's about a darker skinned African-American boy's relationship with the moon. And like the way his skin like reflects light in a similar way and glows. So I just think that these are incredible resources for us to share with our children and our friends' kids and ourselves. And I just wanted to share that they are out there.
Thank you, Jessica. And you did say you knew some, I thought it said Persians, and I thought, well, most of us here know Persians, but that wasn't what you wrote. Tell us what it was that you wrote and tell us what that means.
They're not going to be happy with me, but two of my best friends are sisters, and I jokingly refer to them as Texican because they're Persian and Mexican.
Texicans. Okay, that was it. I tell you, I'm enjoying all of these, what do you call them? These combinations, you know.
We're creating.
Yeah, yeah. What someone said, Elaine, was that you?
Fusions. My dad
Fusions.
used to call us Tongus. We were Tongan Jews.
Tongus.
Yeah. And my Tongan mom was like, oh my God, stop. I'm like,
tongue use. I never would have figured that one out if you hadn't told me.
I didn't think of it as a thing until I met another mixed Tongan and Jewish person. And she was like, are you a Jewangan? And I was like, oh, we were Tongus.
Jewangan.
But we're like, yeah, it's all ridiculous. We're just people.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great. Thanks so much, Jessica. Okay, Samira, where are you? You still here?
Just real briefly, Nuriel got me all excited because
Can you speak up just a little bit more?
Sure.
Thank you.
I won't talk long. I just seeing Nuriel and hearing her got me real excited because I grew up in Indonesia. When I was about 2, my parents moved there during the 10-year crusade. And as a result, I was the other, obviously, but very much accepted because I was different, but my difference was embraced, thankfully. And then moved to Iran when I was 16, and Persians didn't know what to do with us because we're Iranian, but we weren't really Iranian.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but then again, we weren't really, discriminated against, so to speak. But we did feel kind of awkward, and then coming to the States, being other again. So all my life I've been the other, and I see a real advantage to that because then you can get to see from a different perspective what it's like. And as a result, it's what pushed me to go into diversity work. Because it just seemed like, being that you live on this side and that side, this culture, that culture, you kind of, get a sense. And yeah, so I'm really grateful. But at times lately, then we moved to Israel. And at the Baha'i World Center, I want to say That was the first place I had lived, where the first week we were there during our orientation, realizing I'm not alone. There are people all over the world. There are people at the Baha'i World Center that have my background. And I look at you folks, and a lot of you are the same. You know, it's like you're one ethnicity and another, and then you grew up in it and you know this language, you know, and it's just, so thank you. This is really lovely, really very rich. And it makes me feel at home.
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I just want to say one other thing real quickly.
Please.
You know, we see someone of a different ethnicity as the other, right? Until you get to know them. So we really have to make this effort, right? To reach out to people and then see that, oh, they're human just like I am. They're really not that different, you know? So I think this is something we Baha'is and everyone should make that effort and step out of our discomfort or uncomfortable zone if you feel that way. But I find that I'm really drawn to people of other cultures. Maybe a lot of you feel that way because of, you know, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Amir has asked to speak. He's coming after you, Parviz and Terry. Do you mind if he goes first since he hasn't had an opportunity to speak?
Oh, no, not at all. Actually, that was Terry, and she said she's passing. So
Oh, Terry's passing? Oh, okay. Okay, Amir, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay.
First of all, I just want to say thank you for all the people who spoke, because it was very enlightening and interesting to see all these mixed families, and the solution for racism is just having people mix up with others, and then. But I also wanted to share a little bit of my experience. So you can probably hear from my accent, I was born in Israel, in Jerusalem, with a Jewish background. And for us, the racism or the divide was between Ashkenazi Jews and Sephardi Jews. So two different, Jews that came from two different areas in the world, and my mother is originally from Morocco, and Bukhara, and my father is from Eastern Europe, from Poland. So you can see from my face, I'm probably looking more passing as a white, but for me, I was also felt that I didn't fit because I wasn't this or that. And then I ended up marrying a Christian woman from Canada, and then my children are not that and not that. And also I wanted to mention, I recently I'm getting familiar with what's happening, for example, in Thailand. So in Thailand, they are all Thai people, but there are people who are white-skinned Thai people and dark-skinned Thai people. And,
yes.
And they are so, there is such a divide, even though they are supposedly the same race. If we call race, I don't even know what race means. It's just kind of a made-up in my mind. But you could see within the same nation, within the same village, with the people who are kind of divided just because their skin is darker or lighter, which is all, in my opinion, all bullshit. But sorry to use this word, but it's just nonsense, I should say. But that's reality, and it affects people. And I'm not disregarding the reality of people, and I understand that, and learn myself and that's why I'm here in this forum to learn more. But it's just and I think that the Baha'is have sort of have the answers, that everybody is the same, which is beautiful. That's why one reason why I'm interested in Baha'i faith. And I had to travel all the way to Nanaimo, to the other side of the globe, to find out that there is actually Baha'i faith, because for some reason we don't know anything about that in Israel. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Amir. We appreciate hearing your story too. That's just wonderful. Oh, I put in the chat that if anyone who's not on our email list would like to be added on, please, you can send it to me privately, or just put it in the chat. If you give me your email address and tell me what city, state, or country you're from. That's because we just like to be able to brag about how far reaching we are or how deep we're going into, the United States or whatever. So that would be awesome if you could contribute to that for us. Any other questions, comments? I'd like to call on, there's one person I saw here, and okay, I think she's left. I don't see her anymore. It was Carrie. And I was going to ask her if she wanted to speak on something. Oh, also, the relative comments in the chat that are providing information or insight to the things we discussed, I'll be pulling that out, and that will be sent to everyone, okay, in the follow-up email that tells you when this recording is available on YouTube. Okay, so Regina's going to take us out.
Mm-hmm. 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 Oh God, my beloved. Oh God, my heart's desire. Oh God, my beloved. Oh God, my heart's desire. Mm-hmm. 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 Oh God, my beloved. Oh God, my heart's desire. Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.